Pros podcast, where we talk with different pros of different industries who work on your home. From remodeling to upgrades, from hiring and vetting contractors to choosing special features, from do's and don'ts to costs and budgeting, from protecting your investment to adding long-term value. We are going to unpack the tips and tricks from the masters of their trades, so you will have the knowledge on how to protect your biggest investment and how to turn your house into a dream home. Thomas Eaves is a DFW area realtor. He's been in business for over a decade. For the last 8 years, he's been at the helm of his real estate team, the Eaves Group Realty at Keller Williams Realty. Thomas is also a former real estate coach for over 70 real estate agents. He has supervised over $75 million in real estate transactions in his career. Welcome, Thomas Eaves.
Fascinating.
Wow. That was a good intro.
Yeah.
That made me sound decent. Thank you.
You bet. Anytime. Glad to have you on the show, Mr. Thomas, the realtor.
It's an honor.
Well, we have a lot to work with there, Thomas. Thanks for being you. All right, on our list of topics today, we are starting off with buying older houses. That's good because that's what there's a lot of out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I don't know if you know this, but we don't have enough houses currently for the amount of people who would like to own homes.
Really?
We're at a considerable inventory shortage, millions of homes short of what we actually need. And a lot of people, particularly first-time home buyers, are a little scared off by older homes. A lot of it's cosmetic. They're looking at it and they're going, oh, I don't want to live in that. What they don't recognize is that older houses, the way they're built, you think about all the ranch-style houses that were built in the 70s and the 80s. These are like flat roof lines and low ceilings. There's like, oh my God, I don't want to live in that. It's the perfect canvas for like the minimalist contemporary houses that people are really after today. And I'm like, if you could just recognize that we could make this house look like Pinterest threw up in here, I mean, you'd love it. It's what Chip and Joanna Gaines go after. So, people lack the vision sometimes, but man, there's so much opportunity in these older houses.
Agreed. We used to look for, when we were in the flip business, we looked for the most distressed property in the best neighborhood. We were always neighborhood hunting, and obviously we wanted to, as much as possible, be able to have something that was pretty rough so we could work towards cleaning it up and straightening it out. And we actually preferred houses with foundation problems so that we could get better price on that. And it takes a while before foundation business is not scary to you, and sewer leaks and all that stuff's pretty daunting to some, but there's definitely deals to be had if you're willing to work through that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm really glad you brought up the foundation thing because, where we live, foundation, I'm saying problems with my quotes here, but it's inevitable. It's practically inevitable. Very rarely do I walk into a house that's been standing for more than half a decade that doesn't have some sort of movement. And so, people get real scared off of foundation maintenance. You got to do it. And foundation work, assuming that it needs to be done, it's not as daunting as you think it is.
Well, there's a saying in the industry that there's two kinds of foundations in North Texas: those that have been fixed and those that need to be fixed.
Yeah.
And so, North Texas has got some rolly soil. The problem here is PVR, potential for vertical rise. So the PVR of the soil is a measurable number, which has to do with when water's added to the soil, how much it expands. And so when there's the PVR, I think it's obviously a 0 to probably about 7 being the worst. I've seen 5s before on PVR. So when you have a soil study done, they come out and they check the soil and they see how much the potential for vertical rise is there by taking soil samples. And when you have high potential for vertical rise soil, that's what moves the foundations around. And a lot of times people think that soil moves from just the soil, and that's not really the case. It only moves when there's water introduced. And so with potential for vertical rise, that's what pushes soil. It swells when it's full of water, and it contracts when it's out of water. And so there's lots of variables to the whole soil game, right? There's the, trees close and all that. So there's many, many factors that go into these foundations. But
Check out the big brain on Brad.
But effectively, talk about your buyers when they come in and see foundation problems. I guess one question would be, what do they think in your experience? And then also in your experience, what should they think? And so, kind of shaping their minds on how to look at foundation problems.
Yeah, so we would never we would never tell people, hey, you shouldn't be concerned about foundation problems. But what most buyers, when they walk into a house, think is they'll see the taping and bedding coming out of two pieces of sheetrock coming together. They'll see a vertical crack next to a door or a window, and they're like, oh man, the foundation's. It's like, well, no, the foundation's moved, and it will. That's not an indication of a foundation problem. I always tell people, if you start seeing diagonal cracks, here's some opportunity for concern. Sometimes you can feel it. I've got people who, like, you can walk in, it's like you can get vertigo. You can feel the foundation moving. You bring up a good. I mean, look, the fact is we have moisture here, and we also have times of extreme drought. So that goes back to the inevitability of this foundation moving. There's actually a neighborhood in Denton called Idiot's Hill. And there's a lot of lore around why it's called Idiot's Hill, but one of the theories is that they were like, you'd be an idiot to build houses on that soil. And it's a bunch of ranch-style houses, big footprints, all single-story, and they're all cracked in half in like 30 different places. So, it stands up to its name. But normally, what I tell people is like, hey, you're going to see settlement. It's inevitable. But my suggestion is you talk to a foundation professional if you're actually wanting to figure out the legitimacy of these feelings of the foundation. So a lot of things other people don't know is that most of the weight of a house is on the outer edge of it. All the exterior walls weigh a lot, right? And so they'll get an inspector who doesn't know much about foundation will come out there and they'll do the spider. They'll put the little thing in the center of the house and they'll run all the stuff out to the edges and they'll go, oh man, look, it's like an inch lower over there next to the house needs to be bulldozed. And I'm like, well, no, that's just where the wall is. So it weighs a lot. The middle doesn't have anything on it, doesn't weigh a lot. And so, explaining that to people is always a comical experience, but usually not a cause for concern. I've never seen a house fall down because of the foundation. It hasn't happened. I'm sure it has happened, but I've never seen it happen.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that exactly what you're talking about gets people so freaked out, and they see these numbers that the foundation's an inch off. And what you want is for your foundation to work together. So if the whole thing is tilted, and as long as you're not having like major dips or areas where the soil's swelling, if you get, obviously when you have a sewer leak, you get swelling soil or a water leak, and so you'll have water underneath the foundation will cause that. But so I don't know if people know this. This is probably not a commonly known fact, but within the industry standard, 1 inch of fall in 20 feet is considered zero.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you're allowed an inch of fall over 20 feet, and so that side measures 20, this side measures 21. That's within like. They're not even supposed to work on that foundation, right? And people will see an inch off or 3/4 of an inch off in a thing, and they're freaked out. And I think, man, that's not even perceptible to walking it. So and what Thomas is talking about is around the edge, almost every house, when you get to exactly what he's talking about, the exterior walls is drop down, and they drop down, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, a whole inch. Some of them drop 5 inches, right? There's plenty of houses where they do need perimeter piers. And, okay, so you talked about what they do think, and they freak out. Like, what should they think? They should think, man, I'm only, there's value, right? In a house with some hair on it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like what you're talking about. You always look for the most distressed properties. I would say, depending on where these buyers are in their journey. First-time home buyers probably aren't looking for the hairiest house, and yet, there's inexpensive repairs and there's expensive repairs. And I think that foundation is actually more reasonable than most people would think. And the other thing is that a lot of times, during an inspection period, we're able to get these costs covered by the seller. We're for the first time in like a decade back in a market where sellers are willing and a lot of times really in need of performing some of these repairs for the buyers or giving credits for such. And so I would never let that. I mean, it does not indicate that the house is not structurally sound. It doesn't mean that. One, and two, the repairs could be downright reasonable, and we could get all or most of it covered. So, foundation. I didn't know this was going to be a foundation thing, but the foundation is probably one of the least of our concerns. The roof, similar. It's like, oh man, the roof is beat up. It's like, well, the cool thing about the roof is that insurance covers it. It's like, well, and we're in Texas. We're going to replace it every 3 or 4 years anyway. So let's just get that experience out of the way.
Average life of a roof in the state of Texas is 7 years.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, they have all these 20 and 30-year shingles. Almost no roof makes it that long. The one thing that you do not want to do, and I can tell you this from experience, is buy a roof with hail damage that you didn't ascribe to the previous owner. That is a disaster. That will cost you buying one roof, and I have written a check to do that. And so I'm telling people, please have your roof inspected for hail damage before you close on the house, because that would go under the previous owner's insurance policy unless you close, and then it goes on your insurance policy. Oh, wait, but the hail event happened before you had insurance on the home, so it doesn't go under your policy. It goes out of your checkbook.
Yeah, it's one of the first things that we do whenever we look into somebody purchasing a property is this roof insurable? I don't ask if it's perfect. I don't ask if it's new. I say, is it insurable? And so you need to pick who you're going to have for insurance and have them come out here and look at it and say, yeah, we'll write a policy on it, or no, we won't. And if no, we won't, well, one, you're not going to get a mortgage. If you're a cash buyer, that's one thing. You can make that decision if you want to, if it makes sense for you. It sounds like that's not something that you would ever do again.
I did pay cash for that house. That was part of the problem.
Yeah. Your mortgage lender is not going to give you a loan on a house that is not structurally sound in their opinion. And having a roof on it, that's a pretty important factor. Protects all the other stuff.
And so your three major gotchas when buying any sort of property, but a distressed property primarily, would be roof, foundation, and then substructure water leaks. Having water leaking underneath the slab is big trouble and pretty easily fixed. And there's ways to go about that. There's a lot of this trenchless pipe repair, trenchless sewer repair is really catching on. And okay, let's go back to the foundation thing. Do you make recommendations to your buyers on foundation repair measures? And do you have a go-to subcontractor that or do you have a tiered good, better, and best, or something like that?
I've got one company that I've been referring for years. And I don't mean to pitch them here. They didn't pay for the time.
No, we can throw their name out there. That's no problem.
MBR Guaranteed Foundation Repair. Philip Duffin has been with them for a real long time, and he's always treated me right. He comes and inspects the property for free. He'll write up a great, does the map of the property, shows all the different level changes, and then he'll say, like, it's good, it's bad, it's ugly.
And we'll put a link down to Philip's company below in the comments.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I like that.
Does good work and for reasonable costs and has been for a really long time. But most, I would say 90% of the, because people like, you're a salesperson, you only make money when you sell these piers on these foundations. I would say 90% of the time, I've been doing this a decade. 90% of the time when he comes out, he goes, you need a maintenance plan, you need soaker hoses, you need gutters, you need to get water away from the structure. And so I'm like, well, if he is just trying to sell you, he's doing a real cruddy job. Because 9 out of 10 houses I've brought him, he hasn't, so prescribed any work for.
But that's someone that's actually adding value and helping you assure your buyers of what they're getting into.
That's right, and he has no shortage of work as a result.
So, and I've found that telling people the truth is almost like advertising. They put you in their folder under trusted entities. Okay, and then on to here's a foundation technique that I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with, but there is several companies now using foam injections, and this is not meant to be a foundation seminar by any stretch. I know we're trying to, but if you're talking about how to fix your house, both on the buyer side and the seller side. They have foam injections which don't require access holes. They just drill a 5/8 inch hole, then go right through your hardwoods. And so that's something to, if you have a foundation that's dipping in the center of the house and access is not from the outside, where they're going to have to do sizable breakouts. Foam foundation, Eurotech is a company. We can put that down in the link, Eurotech. And I think they've actually just gone and they're called Groundworks or something now. But anyway.
Well, interior piers are a real pain in the you-know-what. And so that's a great alternative. I think people are aware that they can do foam injections under driveways and things like that. Something I learned about foam injections literally less than a week ago is that they can correct the tilt of your pool, which I did not know. My pool leans about 8 inches down towards Mother Nature is going to win eventually. But eventually my pool will be in the creek behind my house. But I've learned recently that I can correct that by exactly that. So that's a really cool new technology.
Yeah, I used to sell pools, and they come with a lifetime structural warranty usually, but that has no effect on the tilting of it. Like, just that it's going to hold water, so they can tilt all day long. In fact, with the moving soils in Texas, they kind of expect that they will.
Yeah, which isn't a huge problem until the skimmers aren't underwater anymore.
That's really tilted.
Yeah, it's a real tilt.
That's like a teapot.
Yeah.
It's like get your cup out at one end, and you can fill her up. Water feature.
Tell me what your buyers think about pier and beam foundations. In Texas, we're going to look at probably 95% of the foundations you're going to see are going to be slab on grade.
Yeah.
And what a slab on grade, there's several different varieties of them. There's a post-tension slab on grade. There's a rebar slab on grade, and then there's just so rebar. There's two kinds: post-tension slab on grade, and then rebar slab on grade. What about the pier and beam world? Do you see that much, and does it factor into people's opinions?
Yeah, we see. I mean, it's all older houses. That's what we're talking about. It's older houses, and a lot of older houses will be on pier and beam, and most people that walk in, so it's funny, they walk in the front door and they hear the boom, boom. They hear the bass under their foot and they're like, what's going on?
And I explain living underneath there.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is a pier and beam foundation. And actually, a lot of foundation professionals will tell you, and I don't know if you agree with this, they'll tell you this is the superior foundation for this area.
For sure.
There's like, this moves, and it's built to move.
Well, think about what you've done is you've taken the center out. And so now when we going back to soil class from earlier, when you have potential for vertical rise, the soil can swell underneath the house with no impact. Right. So that you get a hollowed out area.
Well, we'll get these pier and beam houses that haven't been adjusted in 100 years. And so like the middle is all sagging and they're just like, oh my gosh, this place has got to be bulldozed. And I'm like, no, you just got to go in there. I mean, they jack them up, they shim them, they can fix this.
Just a few shims later and you're headed down the road.
It's not crazy. And people are just like, oh man, it's got to be expensive. Like, it's not crazy technology. It's like they're literally going to go up there and make it higher and put stuff under it. Like, you ever put a book underneath a dresser because you want it to be like, that's what they're going to do.
How about those sugar packets under the leg of the table at Arby's?
Yeah, is that Splenda down there? It's like, yeah, that's what's holding your house up. But it works, is the fact. So the one concern that we always have, and sometimes it's found and sometimes it's not, is moisture gets under those houses. They can do real exceptional jobs of going down there and putting in moisture barriers and making them real nice and putting sensors down there that'll make noise if they get if you get moisture down there. They didn't really do that back when they were building these houses in the 20s and the 30s. And so I'm not saying there's not work to be done on them, but I think it's a great option. I'd live in a pier and beam house tomorrow.
Yeah. And the one thing that the trade-off that you get from on a pier and beam is, now that you've created this void space, and something wants to get into that void space, and most of the time it's water. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a lake below your house, it's going to cup your wood floors, it's going to mold, mildew, all that. But exactly what Thomas said, we have ventilation we put down there. We put them on a humidistat as well as a thermostat, so when the humidity's high. One thing we used to do on the big houses I built is we would take attic air and blow it down into the crawl space when the time was right. So we'd take hot air out of the attic and blow it into the cool, moist crawl space to keep that dude from mildewing. So there's a variety of ways to skin a cat. The other thing is on remodel, if you're remodel conscious, Pier and beam is going to be a superior foundation because you don't have to cut into the slab to move plumbing around underneath, and it makes pretty nice work on moving plumbing. So if you're interested in doing heavy renovations where you're relocating plumbing, pier and beam would be to your advantage.
I saw cousin Andy Sprinklers they did a drain too along the outside of a pier and beam foundation just to get it all to go out, and then pumped it out to the.
Also gives you the opportunity to say the word moist a lot. So
that's a benefit.
It's a bunch of benefits. You're nailing it. Tough crowd.
I think we've kind of beat the horse to death on the foundation.
Just want to talk more about foundation.
Yeah, right. So, other things to watch out for. Do you have any list of gotchas that you sort of insist that your clients inspect?
I never insist.
Okay.
I highly recommend that they get it inspected. I can't force them to do anything. Whenever we look into old houses,
do you curse them under your breath as they turn and walk away when they say they're not going to look at that?
You are one pathetic loser.
There's that 20% of clients that I have feelings about, but no, I'd never name them. Not here.
On this podcast.
I'll tell you what usually comes up, whether we think it's important or not on these old houses. I would say number one is wiring. Not necessarily the wires that are running through it, but the panel. A lot of there's home insurance companies that will not insure houses with like this old specific model of a Federal Pacific
fire starter.
Yep. I mean, and they've got that reputation. I still see houses with them to this day. They've survived. Has it arced? Yes. Is there black sheetrock around it? Sometimes. But yeah, no, it's important, and it's something that we look at.
And so what we're talking about, to be specific, is the panel, which is where the wires come in from the power supply. So the panel is the first stop of the power when it gets into your home. So you have electric meter, heavy wires running into the panel. The panel distributes the power to the house.
Right.
And what we're specifically talking about is a older Federal Pacific panel that is known in the industry to have started fires.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're referencing. And so this is something where you'd have an electrician to remedy this. You'd have an electrician come in, and the range on that is, if you know somebody, you can probably get it done in the $1,500 range. And if you go
have the seller pay for it.
Yeah, and if you go get a high-end company to do it, which I'd get a quote from the high-end guys and have the cheap guy do it. But that's just how I roll. But
sure.
A big Baker Brothers or Milestone Electric are probably in the $4,000 range to replace a panel. So $1,500 to $4,000 would give you a pretty good range on that.
Yeah, they've got the gravitas, but then you've got Chuck down the streets like, I'll do it for $700. Yeah, I know. So that's one of the things we look at, and everyone always looks at their inspection report and there's like, well, Thomas, the wiring's not up to code. I don't think I've been doing this a third of my life. I don't think I've been in a single house that was up to code. I don't think I've been in a single one. So the chances are that the wires that are coming out of the box are they up to code? No. Are they new? No. They're probably okay. They're probably fine. Now, I did have a house in Farmersville many, many moons ago that had knob and tube wiring. And knob and tube wiring, that's some pretty old stuff. Knob and tube wiring, and I'm sure you're more educated on this than I am, but from my understanding, it actually it's on these little it runs these little tubes. It's got these little knobs that are like basically in your the beams in your attic, and right around all of that lint-looking insulation, and it disperses its heat through the wires, which is not ideal.
Brilliant.
Yeah, well, it may have been brilliant at the time. So anyway, so knob and tube, we don't see it very often, but when we do see it, it's something we have to call out. But I guess the point I was making is usually that's not what's happening. It's usually the panel, which is great because you can replace the panel with relative ease. You don't have to like rip out sheetrock and go into the attic and rip out all the wiring. So, but a lot of people will see like, oh my God, the wiring is that go. We got to rewire the whole house. And it's like, you probably don't. Good.
And then we had a little segment, a little era of time when they put aluminum wiring in. And the trouble with aluminum wiring is what makes it dangerous is over time, as it heats it, as current flows through the aluminum wiring, it heats and contracts, and it actually changes shape, unlike copper. And it changes shape and it becomes loose. And so the problem is not the conductivity or anything else about the wiring. It's just the arcing at the switches. And so they have a very, very viable fix, and they just pigtail. So they let the aluminum wiring come all the way across the house, and for the last 6 inches, they put a copper pigtail on there. And so this is called pigtailing a pigtailing an aluminum system, and it's pretty prevalent and in that certain era of houses. But you definitely want to know that you have aluminum wiring before you close on the house, because unknown sucks, right? You just got to know. And so I think one of the things that Thomas and I would both tell you is to do the test, do your diligence, and it's not that we're saying any of this stuff is a deal breaker, but just go into it being educated.
Know it so you can manage it.
Yeah, know it so you can manage it. Exactly right.
So, the wiring, like I said, I didn't mean to spend an hour on that, but the wiring is one of the most major concerns we see in these old houses. I would say secondly is the thing I mentioned earlier. They had that insulation that looked like dryer lint that they put in all that. They put 3/8 of an inch in it in all the houses, and they were like, man, this is good insulation. It's going to keep it nice and cool in here. And it doesn't. It doesn't. So insulation, energy is more expensive than it's ever been. And one of the major contributors to that is how often your HVAC system is running. Your HVAC system is going to run constantly in the 110-degree summers in Texas if your insulation sucks. And chances are, if it's a house that was built before, 1995, you've got that insulation in your attic, and it's not good. And so, there's a lot of options there. I don't know if the seller's going to pay for you to have new insulation, but it is something to look out for.
Sure. And at least you know.
It's something to know to manage.
This is kind of one of those things where when you buy your first used car, you just are looking at how many scratches it has on it and how many miles it has on it. And then as you get down the road, you realize, if I buy a car that has bald tires, that's $1,500. And I could, if I just looked for one that had newer tires, I could save myself that and kick the cost of the new tires down the road. Sure. That's a lot to do with this, because there's a lot of unseen things. If you're a first time buyer, you're just looking at how shiny the thing is, the curb appeal. And then as you dig into it, and so we're trying to help you become advanced buyers right out of the gates and look at the stuff, the secondary items, you're not seeing the fancy appliances, but you're saying, kind of take a little deeper dive, right?
Yeah, well, they say knowledge is power. And I always say, well, knowledge is potential power, right? It's about what you do with it. And so I would say if you have the knowledge that all of these things exist, they're happening, you can manage them, you know what to do, and we can connect that with the proper vendors, right? And I can connect you with the proper people to give you quotes on this and payment plans and manage this over time. Well, okay, well, now you're really set up. You can have the shiny thing. You can make it shiny over time. Like, we can really polish and buff this out. And I just don't, the number one tip I have for people is you don't know what's available to you. You really don't know until you're connected with the right professionals. And I think that's, I don't mean to pitch us. But I really think that's our role, is to connect people with the information and with the vendors that they don't know are available to them.
And, technology is constantly changing. So what you knew to be true, like this foam insulation or foam foundation repair, the foam injection was not a thing 10 years ago. And so, constantly when you reach out to professionals who are involved in this daily, we're seeing new stuff coming in, replacing old stuff. And
yeah, well, I think that's why our industry has so much continuing education. I think about inspections. Inspections used to be a guy that would walk around, he'd turn on stuff, and he'd be like, well, it's good or it's not good. And, you've got a lot of squeaky doorknobs and squeaky hinges, and got to replace these. And now, they're walking through theirs with these FLIR meters, and they're measuring the heat signatures that are coming out of the attic and coming through the doors and windows. And it was like, man, it's a scary amount of stuff. It really puts a lot of pressure on new construction, new home builders. These houses, people are expecting them to be in pretty pristine condition. I got to be honest, they're usually not. That's not to say the builder sucks or they're doing a bad job or they're trying to deceive you. It's just that usually, subcontractors miss stuff all the time.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to pitch or put down D.R. Horton, but the guy that built the house, it's not the same guy in that D.R. Horton subdivision versus that one, and so there's a lot of variance. And so, like you said, we always recommend people do their due diligence. So not to get caught up on the insulation train. Next thing we usually look for is aluminum windows. Yet another thing, we're talking about efficiency. We're talking about the cost of energy. Well, insulation is a great start, and the next best thing you can do is have good quality windows on your house. Do they cost a fortune? Well, they can. And this might be controversial. They sell some badass triple pane argon sealed windows that you can get for $1,500 each. And I don't think they're totally necessary. I really don't. In most houses, I don't. We're in Texas where the humidity is constantly changing. We go from 0 degrees in the winter to 120 degrees in the summer. I'm just like, your seals are going to break down in half a decade. They're going to. And that $1,500 window you spent all that money on is going to be, reduced to rubbish. And I was like, well, I don't know that you need that. I think you need a good intermediate grade window. My opinion.
Yeah, totally agree. I just sold my house, and we went through the window game, and we had a group come out here, and we have 17 windows, and they gave us a bid for this house. Wait for it, for $72,000 to replace 17 windows, and then they did this huge discount on there, and they discounted it from $72,000 to $49,000.
Wow.
So
margins are good in the window game.
And so they just may as well write graham crackers on there for the price, because nothing means anything.
Yeah.
So I told the guy, our windows are old and we sold our house and they wanted to replace the windows. And I said, I can get the windows done on this house for $12,000. That's install labor and install. And so I went directly to the window manufacturer I have a relationship with. And I said, hey, windows are still in the $300 to $400 a piece range, aren't they? Yeah. And these are good vinyl insulated, argon seals, all the stuff. And so we went from $72,000 to $12,000 with one phone call. $60,000 changed. And one of the things about being educated is you will get so much more out of your house. So if you go with the guy that is $72,000 discounted to $50,000, so guy A buys the $50,000 windows. I buy the $12,000 windows. Now I have $38,000 hanging around to work on another project with. That gets me new appliances, new this. So just taking anyone that walks off the street, their advice on this, and what I would do, my recommendation to people when you're looking at something, pull up Craigslist, pull up Facebook Marketplace, type in new windows on there, and see if there's anyone. I mean, whatever it is, appliance, whatever else. Just know, I'm in the market for one of those IBC totes, the water jug that's inside the metal frame, and they're international bulk container, IBC bulk container, and you can go buy new ones online for $200, or you can buy one that's had one use, been emptied out, and it's $30. And so 30 versus 200, the guy gets to save. He has $170 still in his pocket. And so that's one of the things that will really help you maximize your project, is being able to do stuff at reasonable, like you said, the $1,500, so $2,000. So my window's at $51,000. If we round up $1,000, that would mean those windows are $3,000 each installed. That's insane.
And would you ever really conventionally notice the difference between your $400 windows or your $3,000 windows?
Can't. No one could walk up unless it was a window.
Yeah, a window
savant.
Professional, absolutely.
Right.
Would you notice a difference in the efficiency of your house? A significant difference. We're talking dollars and cents. Would you notice a difference in the noise cancellation? I just don't think you really would. Not at least not to the margin of a $3,000 difference. I just don't think you would.
But if you bought new appliances with your remaining $38,000, and if you put in a big chunk of your swimming pool for that,
yeah. Well, I think that where we get into trouble is that we'll recommend to the clients, you should have a quote, during your due diligence period, get you a quote, and someone like that will come out and quote them, and then they'll be like, well, we can't buy this house, we can't afford $72,000 worth of windows. I'm like, well, okay, well now I've got to play this game where I have to tell you that even though I told you to do your due diligence, you did it wrong. So,
sure.
It's uncomfortable.
And that's when you're saying no, I got a guy that can do it for $12.
Yeah, right. Well, and okay, so you said windows, and if you do the math on what a window represents wall space wise, it's insignificant. Your insulation is what controls your HVAC cost. Your house, the comfort of your house is not driven by the windows.
Yeah.
Contrary, and let's be clear on this: the windows, when you replace your windows, unless you have plastic sheeting for windows, you're going to notice almost no material difference on your electric bill. There's just not.
Right.
And I think it's a misnomer. I think it's an industry lie that these windows will just cut your energy bill in half, because they don't represent half of your wall space, right? And they're half of your exposure to the outside.
Yeah. If you want to cut your bill in half, turn your AC off.
Yeah. Yeah. Run it 5 degrees hotter. Right. Okay, so we've gone over that. We've hit on wiring, we've hit on insulation, we've hit on windows. Let's talk about plumbing and the significance of plumbing, primarily under your house, where you can't see a water leak.
Yeah, it's a really good distinguishing thing to make, is because I don't think I've been in a house in the last 10 years that doesn't have some sort of leak under a faucet, right? You've got faucet leaks, you've got the bathtub drips, something like that, and none of these are the end of the world, and if you ask the seller to fix them, it's just stupid. It's just dumb. We're worried about plumbing leaking where you can't get to it, inside of a wall, underneath the house. And there's detection strategies for that, and that has the potential to get really, really expensive and really, really out of control if it's not observed and managed. And so, you mentioned hydrostatic testing earlier. We normally don't. I don't see a whole lot of hydrostatic testing just because we just decided to do a hydrostatic test. Where I see it a lot is whenever there's concerns with the foundation, or after we've done work on a foundation, you're moving something that big around that's got pipes running through it. You should probably do it. Most foundation companies do it by default, but a lot of people, a lot of the cheaper guys, we'll do it on a budget guys. They're like, all right, we've moved it and we're done. And I'm like, no. Now we need to make sure there's nothing happening underneath. So yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, and so what he's talking about is when you pick a foundation up, which is almost always what you're doing. We're never lowering anything down. So you want the pipes to come with it, right? And if they do separate. One thing in Texas to be mindful of is we used tons and tons and tons of cast iron back in the 60s, 70s, even I think the PVC 50s, 60s, 70s. I think the 80s started, there's kind of a mix in there where you could have cast iron, you could have PVC, but the primary thing that you're concerned about with cast iron is what's called channel rot. And it's the center of the bottom side of the drain where it's touching the soil has just rotted out. And so the pipes can be totally rotted out where they will not hold water. So when we talk about a hydrostatic test, what they do is they come in and put a balloon, for lack of a better word, in your sewer line, and they block off the connection of your house to the sewer facility, to your city sewer. So they stop the sewer from flowing into the city side, and they see if your house will hold water. And so that's called putting your house on test. And so in a hydrostatic test, we block off the connection to the city sewer, we pull a toilet, and they fill the system up with water and see if it'll hold. If the system will not hold water, that is a sign of some sort of breakage on the sewer side. Now, what's the significance of a breakage on the sewer side? Well, you can live in a house that has rotted out pipes for 20 years and never know it. Because
until suddenly you do. Until suddenly your bathtub's full of a weird colored liquid.
And so sometimes you can just live there. And so case in point, my house. When I bought the house, I knew that I had a sewer system that wouldn't hold, and I have lived here for 9 years and never know otherwise. Okay, so back to hydrostatic testing. So we block the sewer off, we block the sewer connection, we fill the house up with water and see if it will hold. So this gives us an idea if water is going out the system with it blocked off to the city sewer, you have a problem. Now you have a sewer leak on the sewer side. So there's two types of water underneath your home. There's clean water, which is supply, and there's gross water, which is sewer, which is water that's going away. And so we are checking with a hydrostatic test, we are checking the sewer side, And so there are now, okay, so let's say you fast forward, we have a leak. The water drops in the toilet. When we fill it up to the top, we can see that water is dropping. We have a leak. Now what do? We can do two things. We can tunnel under the house and change those sewer pipes out via tunneling, old conventional style, or we can use what's called CIPP, cure in place pipe. And CIPP, it's basically a sock that is made out of various materials, but they push the sock through the pipes, and then they go through and clean the pipes with a rotor deal, and then they push this sock through the pipes, and it has epoxy on the outside of it, and it cures in place, as they said. And this is called a trenchless repair. There are caveats to it. Everyone will tell you, oh, no problem, we can just come out and repair that with trenchless repair. There's caveats. They have to have access to the hole to be able to push the pipe through, so that's a hole in your house. There's holes that outside where the cleanouts are. They can't go around bins. So there's no perfect answer. But knowing what's under your house before you buy it is quintessential. And that's what this hydrostatic test will show you. And Thomas says that he doesn't do them a lot. Knowing what I know about construction and the severity of the problems that can, and really probably it comes from the fact that I bought a house that had leaky pipes and didn't know about it and had to fix them. I would not ever buy a house without doing a hydrostatic test on it. I would insist on that being, I care more about that, and I could even deal with the foundation drooping before I want to buy a house that has bad sewer piping.
Yeah, so we have a document. I can't remember if it's a Texas Real Estate Commission document or a Texas Association of Realtors document. We have a document that both parties have to sign, assuming we do a hydrostatic test. And basically, what that document sort of explains what's going to happen. But the most important part of that document is explains who's going to pay for damages if they pressure it up and it does something crazy. And so I think that's why most people get scared off of doing it. And I think that's why it usually only happens in the case of foundation work. I'm not opposed to getting it done, and I'm not really sure I know the cost associated with it.
$500 probably.
Yeah.
Plumber comes out, pulls the toilet, plugs it up, fills it up, $500.
Huh. Yeah, $500 that you probably won't regret spending. Because the it's real cost inhibitive if that $500 test results in a rough result.
Sure. Yeah. And depending on the size of the house and all that, everything's per foot. And so you could easily go from, I'd say the low side on sewer repair would be 10 on a cheap one, and you could probably spend in excess of $100,000.
Yeah, I mean, I had a sewer leak under my driveway. So on the way out of the house, 15 feet from the house, and just about a foot away from the city's responsibility, because of course, naturally, and just tunneling under my driveway cost $2,000. So yeah, I think it's real expensive.
The other thing on tunneling to be mindful of is there's no possible way to put all the soil they've dug out back under there. So now you have the potential for creating foundation problems. Yeah. So the trenchless stuff is getting better all the time. It will be the way of the future on foundation repair, on sewer subsurface foundation, on subsurface plumbing repair will be trenchless eventually, and they just continue. They have another thing where they push fluid through and it hardens, and I think that's probably they coat the inside with some sort of something really, really sticky and adheres to the walls, but I don't think that's as far down the road as the cure in place pipe is. Okay, continuing on, we've really beaten the horse up badly on the plumbing side.
Horse is dead.
Let's keep moving. What are your other items to watch out for? Your gotchas, and we're talking pre-purchase stuff we want to unpack and uncover before you purchase.
Yeah, specifically on the older houses. We've beaten the dead horse of the foundation and of roof. We've talked about wiring. We've talked about windows. We've talked about insulation. I'd say if there's anything else that I see come up a lot, it's wood rot. It's wood rot, or the perception of wood rot. Sometimes it ends up being wood-destroying insects, which is a whole other animal, literally. But a lot of these older houses have not been they have a lot of what we would call deferred maintenance, meaning, you got to pay, if you got hardy plank, you've got wood, like these have to be painted, like especially exterior stuff, like stuff has to be maintenance, and people don't. And so we see that particularly up in the eaves and the soffit. Eaves, we see that come up a lot, and then by the way, if you have a certain types of loan programs, like a VA loan, for example, they won't give you a loan if you've got that. So that's yet another inhibitive things on some of these older houses that come up.
What are your thoughts on buying a house on a main thoroughfare or something that backs up to power lines? What do they call that? Incurable encumbrance. Do you show those? Do you recommend people stay away from them? Is it just a case by case basis?
I think it's personal preference. I always try to point. I don't try to draw a ton of attention to it, but I do point it out. The best example. I haven't seen a lot of people run away from listings due to power lines and stuff like that. I've actually been surprised by how few people care. I kind of care.
I do too.
But there's a lot of people who are just like, I've lived under power lines my whole life, and I was like, that explains the third arm. So, as far as road noise, we'll stand outside and they'll be like, man, that's noisy, and I'll be like, all right, we're gonna go inside and close the door, and we're gonna get real quiet, and I want you to tell me what you think. And what you'll find is that a lot of these houses, particularly people don't know about older houses, and I'm sure you can speak to this, is like they used to build them with better stuff. Lumber alone, like a 2x4 used to be 2 inches by 4 inches. I don't know if you'll know this, and it's not anymore. And so like it's, that old saying, like they don't build them like they used to. Like, no, they really don't build them like they used to. And so a lot of times you'll go into these houses and it's like, oh no, this is a freaking fortress. It's good. It's fine. It's like, it doesn't matter that the main thoroughfare is 30 feet away from the front door. It doesn't bother me. And so we try to adjudicate it on a case by case basis. And to some people it matters a lot, and to some people it doesn't matter at all.
And this is an area where windows can be a game changer.
Yeah.
Windows can change the noise level tremendously. And if you live on a noisy thoroughfare or something, windows, this is a place where single pane old style aluminum windows that you're talking about are not up to this task.
Well, I can see the window person that's, doing this behind the tree, and I'm like, okay, how about the windows that face the street? Maybe we spend some money on those, but then you've got the rest of the windows.
Yeah.
Genius.
Absolutely. And then as far as, other things that you would never know would be train horns, the airplanes are going to be pretty, the airplanes are going to be pretty prevalent if they're, and then the other thing is the wind could change and they could be landing out of the north or south or whatever else. And so
people in DFW, what they probably don't realize unless they have some knowledge around airports and pilot training, all that jazz, is that most of the Metroplex, I would say 90% of it, is under what's called the Class Bravo shelf for DFW Airport. So, Thomas, I want a place where there's no air traffic. I don't know of a place.
Canada.
I don't know. Yeah, Canada would be good. It's funny that you mentioned the train horn. That's something I probably should have thought of, because my house backs up to the A train. I mean, if you look out my back window, 50 feet behind my pool that's going into the creek is the A train. And the A train it has a horn, but it doesn't use the horn because they maintain the intersections in such a way that it's exempt. They don't have to use it until the city messes up and they don't maintain it. And then the Federal Railroad Commission, or whoever they're called, I'm sure I'm getting the acronym wrong, will enforce, like, okay, you got to use the horn until they correct these intersections. And let me tell you, something that will rattle your windows. And I think
I live next to a train.
Yeah, it's shocking. It's shocking. And so then everyone dogs the city for months until they fix it. And the Railroad Commission is like, well, can't come out and inspect it until 2027. So, it is something to keep in mind.
Before Thomas sold us our home, or helped us buy the home, I went to check that to see what the train was going to sound like, because we were going to back up to a train. And I was on the driveway, and the guy that owned the home and his realtor pulled up. And I was like, oh, man, fancy seeing you. I was just camping out, seeing if I could hear the train. And he was like, oh, what train? I'm like, what? Oh, you really can't hear it? He's like, oh, yeah, right, train, yeah. And he's French-Canadian, he had an accent. He's like, no, yeah, we can never hear train. It's really no problem. And I don't know what accent I ended up doing there. It wasn't French Canadian.
Slavic, I think.
But yeah, you definitely can hear it. That guy totally played me. And I bought the house based on that, as a concern, and he made it go away.
You were deceived by your real estate professional, I think is what I heard.
Now he lives next door to me, so we have great relationship.
Yeah. There's some stigmas that go along with that, but you learn to tune these things out. I haven't heard the train behind me in years. In fact, I don't hear much of anything anymore.
Me neither. It's funny.
So that was kind of incurable encumbrances, busy streets, and I had another question for you.
Stigmatized properties, hauntings, murders.
Yeah, I've never really. That's not really ever come up too much. Do you run into that? I've never even asked the question. I don't care if someone was killed there. I do care if it was a meth house. Yeah. I've looked at some meth houses over the years, and the plumbing's trashed under them from all the anhydrous ammonia they've washed down the drain.
Yes. If it was based off of movies, if that's any indication of what it is, then I would say it's about 50% of homes are haunted.
Yeah, that's called a stigmatized property. We don't have to disclose it in Texas if it's haunted. But it's interesting, and then a lot of people will ask, like, did someone die here? And the fact is that unless they died as a result of if the house caused it, like the house had like asbestos, radon gas, something like that, they died as a result of a condition in the house, we don't have to disclose it otherwise. So you could have had, 12 deaths in that house. Don't have to disclose.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. I do get asked all the time, though. And I get to give my favorite answer, which is, I have no idea.
Man, unless the house causes, that's pretty funny. If the house did cause someone to die, then you have to disclose that. Just a little disclosure for you: the house off of Monster House,
you could.
There's a real thing. It ate a child.
Never mind that the movie of Halloween was filmed there. The real one.
The real one.
Spit out his shoes.
Yeah, there was a house in Lake Sharon. Probably, that was probably 8 years ago. I'm getting older. Where a gentleman decided to unalive himself with a knife in the shower. And that does not have to be disclosed.
Yeah, suicide's one of those things that,
it's a soft, fluffy subject, and we love it.
It could happen anywhere.
I'm sure that's where y'all expected it to go.
It definitely takes the whole podcast down a notch.
I think it was good. I'm glad I said it.
I do need a murder sound on here. No, Siri, add murder sound. Podcast pad.
Okay, so on to things that are easily changed or added after purchase. We're moving on to another topic now. So, what do you see that people make? Can you give us your top three that people make big deals out of that shouldn't be a big deal, and then probably top three that should be a big deal that people overlook?
I don't know if I can keep it to three, but I'll do my best.
Okay,
I'm going to fail right off the bat. Flooring. The wall, the color of the walls. Whenever I think about these older houses, I immediately think of that really dark, cheap wood paneling that they had in every house in the 70s and the 80s. I mean, you go back and watch the Brady Bunch. It was in his den with the shag orange carpet. Remember that? That was the height of luxury. He was an architect.
Yeah.
And people look at that and they just go, "Oh my God, it's the end of the world." And I'm like, you could paint it. You could put sheetrock there instead. It really wouldn't. I mean, this is an afternoon at Home Depot. It's okay. Life is good. Life is good. You could put vinyl plank down instead of this carpet for a few $100. It's going to be fine. So the fixer-upper people, the fixer-uppers. We want a fixer-upper. That's what they mean. I thought she was trying to get my attention.
No, so just basic cosmetic.
Yeah, basic cosmetic stuff. And then people always go into the kitchen. The kitchen's where most of the money is spent in a house. It's the number one room that sells a house, and it's the number one room that can unsell a house, right? And it's those old cabinets that have the little floral A's on them for some reason, and the countertops, the Formica, and they're green or orange or something like that. All very easily correctable. Very easily correctable. People, and I actually recommend people. I'm just like, these cabinets are great. They're solid. You could paint them. You could stain them. You can do a whole lot of things with these things. Sure. And so people look at those cabinets and they panic. I'm like, no, y'all. This is the opportunity right here. You want these.
You really wimped out, man.
Oh, how could I'd be remiss if I didn't mention popcorn ceilings. Popcorn ceilings. That'll kill a deal. I've still got some in my house. They live in the closets. Yeah. Why, do you have popcorn in your house?
No, that would kill a deal. I mean,
popcorn ceilings. People
I'm
think
I'm stupid, and I know that you could scrape it off there with my hands.
Well,
Depends on if they've
one
been
tip,
painted or
if you're cheap and you're really trying to make the most out of your buck, you can actually take a putty knife. You get about an 8 or 12-inch putty knife and just really easily run it along and just knock all the pimples off. And you can just paint that. Mm-hmm. You don't even have to come back and texture. And so I've done that in a house. A couple of houses we were flipping. I was just like, man, we're just going to knock it off. It's not nice orange peel like this, but it's definitely passable.
Yeah.
All the people that bought houses that you flipped right now are going, that's sick.
Dougie.
Yeah, he didn't texture this at all. It can be a deal killer. I mean, people walk into a house with an 8-foot ceiling and it's popcorn. It's right there. It feels like you're in a cave. I mean, that, the shag, the wood
simply cave.
Yeah. I'm just like, this is an afternoon. These are some DIY projects that I think you'll enjoy it. It'll make
and popcorn ceilings are very popular here.
Very prevalent.
Yeah, 70s, 80s, early 90s.
Early 90s, yeah. I'm shocked by some of the houses that I still walk into. I mean, Lennar was building houses in 2001 with popcorn ceilings.
Wow.
Huh.
Great builder.
Yeah. Okay, popcorn ceilings. You said flooring, paint colors, popcorn ceilings.
Yeah, so the kitchen things, the countertops and the cabinets, and obviously the appliances. Sometimes you get some real cool retro ones. Sure. I was in a house that had a built-in record player the other day.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's the fridges that you get in when the bomb goes off.
Yeah.
And they have the built-in margarita, the blender connections on the counter.
On the counter, yeah. I've seen those recently, and people walk in there like, what are these?
Intercoms were quite hot back in the day.
Intercoms. And what's crazy is a lot of them still work. They still work.
Really?
All these years later, and there's like, man, if it breaks, who's going to repair it? I'm like, I don't know. The company went out of business in 1981. I don't know what you're going to do.
Yeah, no going back there.
It's rough.
Other items that are typically seen as big deals, but not really big deals. You've named 3, so you've satisfied the requirement I placed upon you.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so now items that are overlooked that should be... water my number one would be water. If you see surface water, evidence of water coming into your home, water outside, so I'm talking about rainwater.
Yeah.
Rainwater, if you're low and your neighbors are high, and not high on the good stuff, I'm talking about above you elevation wise.
Right.
That's trouble. And it's hard to correct because you got to get Andy Sprinkler and drain in there to make that go away.
Yeah, man. You bring up a couple of different things. One that I think about is drainage, and particularly about the pier and beam thing we talked about earlier. But the other thing is a lot of people walk into these old houses and they smell. They smell real weird. And one thing I would caution you about is like, don't just go like, no, old house smell. Sometimes it is old house smell, but sometimes that smell is mildew. Sometimes that's an appropriate sound. Sometimes it's mildew. Sometimes it's mold. And that stuff, I mean, you're talking about a severe health hazard. And I don't see it happen super often, but I do see it happen. And I don't think, and that, like I said, that's one of those things that has the potential to become a really, really big deal. So it's something that has to be looked into.
Yeah, being the low guy on the street is tough. If you have water coming to you, that's a problem. Okay, so water, that's a good one to look for. What else?
Yeah, well, I not to beat the water thing to death, but you brought up Andes. They do French drains, and French drains is something you can tell they're French because they have got an accent. But it's something that that would have been a great rim shot opportunity on the pad.
Where are you on the rim shot?
Fascinating.
I bought a house that was built in 1996, so not super old. It was my first home that I ever bought. And after the house was built, they added a pool. They added like a 25,000-gallon pool in the backyard. The people who built this pool could not have given a expletive less about how that yard drained. And I didn't perceive, when I bought the house, it was sunny. It was summer. I didn't know. And then the first rain came. And that that backyard turned into a mud pit. What I learned, the seller didn't disclose this to me, is he had added his own French drains. He added them himself. And I found, he left a bunch of stuff in the garage. I found this sump pump, this little portable sump pump. And that's how he was getting the water out of the backyard. He would put it inside of the French drains that he installed himself, and he would pump the water out over time. So drainage, it has the potential to be a really freaking big deal, especially if you have, 6 dogs. And now I've got a mud pie in the backyard.
Who has 6 dogs?
I know, that would be wild.
Yeah, that's 24 footprints on your floor.
Yeah, on my nice vinyl plank wood floors. So I don't know if we can say enough about water and where it shouldn't be.
Sure.
If you look up at your popcorn ceilings and you see a brown spot, that means there's probably water above it.
Brilliant!
Yeah, water. I'd say water in general. You don't want to have it, except for the drinking water. There's a whole other thing. You ever had drinking water smell like sulfur? That's a lot of fun. Well properties.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. And a well that's gone bad now that's your only water supply, and if you're in a tough area or have no access to water, that's going to be a huge potential problem.
There's areas where the well water was never good. And, you have to put in these chlorine systems. You've got to put in softeners.
What?
It's real expensive real quick.
Why would there be a well that wouldn't have good water in it?
Oh, there's some water supplies that have, especially out along the western DFW, along what do they call it, where all the natural gas is.
Oh.
Barnett Shale.
Yeah, Barnett Shale. There's some really rough water over there.
Yeah, the well's not deep enough. It's in the minerals. When you start getting the water that has a bunch of minerals in it, it's hadn't filtered all the way down. All that water that's in those aquifers is groundwater, right? It runs through in the soil. It filters out, and by the time it gets down to the Woodbine, or there's a bunch of different aquifers. Edwards Aquifer is a big one here. The water's clean and clear, and so
You got the Edwards Plateau as well, Rhett.
Aquifer talk. One of the things that's a huge element on buying a house is, as a buyer, you receive this seller's disclosure, and it has some stuff, and they check some boxes, and they write down how many garage door openers they have and all the stuff on there. And it seems fairly innocuous, but, obviously it's to your advantage to be as honest as you can on there, but not everyone is.
Sure.
And so give us a little bit of feedback on seller's disclosures and gotchas potentially there on.
Yeah. It's nuanced territory for real estate agents, because you'll notice it's not the real estate agent disclosure. I have not been sued, but once I did receive a legal demand letter because I did not disclose that a property that I assisted some buyers on was in an EAS flood buffer. Anyone know?
I've never heard of that.
Anybody in the audience know what an EAS flood buffer is?
I know a fair amount about houses, and I've never heard of that.
I hadn't either. I mean, so this buyer brought, it's been more than 2 years. I think we're past the statute of limitations. She brought this scroll to my office at 9:00 at night, and rolled it out on the table. She's like, I got to talk to you. She was like, this house was in an EAS flood buffer. And I'm like, oh, man.
Who does he play for?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, the thing about it's not the real estate agent disclosure, it's the seller's disclosure. The seller is only required to disclose material facts, and we can't consult them on how to fill it out. So I can't. Now look, as a real estate agent, I do have the responsibility of disclosing what I know about the property. There's a few different methods by which I can do that, but it's not my house. I don't live there. I don't know. I mean, I know what I can see cosmetically whenever I walk in the door, right? And so the reason that we have an option period, the reason that we have inspectors, the reason that we recommend all of our clients do our due diligence, and we do. I'm not trying to sell anybody a lemon. I'm not trying to sell anybody something that they don't. I never have, and I won't. But the reason we recommend everybody do their due diligence is because we don't know, and we can't depend on the seller to know, and we can't depend on the seller to disclose, right? And there's also some gray area. I'm sure there's not a gray area if you're an attorney, but I'm not an attorney. I'll just go ahead and put that disclaimer. I have to put it at the bottom of the screen. I can't determine for you what a material fact is. So if they're like, well, Thomas, I used to have a drainage issue, and I moved into this house 11 years ago, and I put in French drains, and now it's not an issue anymore. Do I have to disclose that? Well, is it a material fact? Well, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. So my answer to your question is I don't know. It's the right answer too, to come from me. But I had a story.
So let's land the plane on that. Your opinion is take the seller's disclosure lightly as a buyer.
Yeah,
Dig into the house.
It's sort of
do
like
the eyeball check.
You guys familiar with the Zestimate?
Yes.
On Zillow.com. Okay, it's kind of like that. It's a fun little reference. It's like, ooh, it's a fun little number, and it could be radically wrong.
Sure.
It could be radically wrong in one direction to the other. And by the way, I would say 90% of the seller's disclosures that come across my desk on a transaction by transaction basis have almost no information. They've checked the boxes, right? And then you get to the lines where they get to disclose in their own verbiage what they know about the property. Most people put NA, none. I mean, and I don't think that's malicious, by the way. I think that most people live in their homes pretty oblivious to what's going on in them.
Sure.
I do think that. I don't think it's. I think it would be wrong to assume that we can. I think it would be wrong to always assume that the seller was malicious in their intent not to disclose.
Sure.
I think you'd be wrong most of the time. So there's one situation that I can think of, and this was not one of my transactions, but I have an acquaintance who is an attorney, and he took me to lunch one day, and he was like, "I got to talk to you about the seller's disclosure." I was like, "Oh, okay, let's talk about it." Basically, these buyers purchased a house where the foundation was shot. I mean, the foundation was ruined, and the sellers had sold this house. They had recently gone in and painted and spackled all over everything. I mean, they made it look real good. And these sellers, the lawyer was able to go and do some investigating and find these sellers had gotten quotes from foundation companies. They knew about the foundation. They knew about the problems. They glossed over it. They put lipstick on that pig, and they sold it without disclosing it. What do you think ever happened to those sellers? Nothing. I mean, they hired an attorney. They went through all the right avenues. They tried. They could not prove to the courts that the seller had this material knowledge and chose not to disclose it. So I'm not an attorney, but to think that you're going to be able to go and sue and be successful and not drown in legal fees, just my recommendation is just do your due diligence.
Yeah, so the onus is on you to figure out what you're getting.
Yeah.
And if you rely on somebody else to tell you what you are not seeing, then you're probably going to be sorely disappointed. And there's not much recourse. The seller's disclosure is not a binding deal. And there's not, if you buy something that's not what it should be or not what it was represented to be, there's not much legal recourses.
I'd say that the most dependable information you're going to get in a house is the information you pay for.
Roger.
Did we land the plane?
We did. Excellent. You have time to talk about school districts? I think we can take a high-level pass at this.
Yeah. The school district, it's my most dreaded question.
Okay.
And the reason that I dread the question is because I don't think it has a singular meaning. People are like, I want to be in a good school district. And I'm like, all right, well, what is that? You want it to have good TEA ratings? I got a great website for that. You want it to, like, the most people that get the most scholarships, the most people that go to an Ivy League school, the most people that pass the STAR test. You're looking for a school that's great with athletics. You're looking for a school with the happiest teachers. You're looking for a school with great fine arts.
They give you now the schools are great on inclusivity.
And
so
yes.
how much,
how inclusive is it?
How inclusive is this thing?
I remember, and I cannot disclose what school district I was talking about. You learn things about. I don't have any kids in school. I attended school in Corpus Christi, Texas. I'm not super familiar with the schools in the area, right? But I had a client who asked me about this particular school district in this particular area that I kind of had some knowledge of. And he was like, hey, is it a good school? And my response was, can your kid fight? So
that'll do it.
Yeah. So anyway, it's
question answered.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I usually recommend those. Like, there's a menagerie of websites you can go to. You can go to a school board meeting. I'm not going to be on the record saying that the school is so good. I'll tell them what I know about it. But it's a really nuanced question.
But the perceived value, the value of the neighborhood is tied to the school district.
Absolutely. So I can tell you what areas are impacted positively by the school district that they're in. So I'll throw some out just to give some examples. Denton ISD, People love it. They have the International Baccalaureate program at Denton High School. They love it. People that are in athletics want to go to Geyer. Okay, over here in Frisco, Lone Star's got a real good football program, right? What's it not called? What is it called? It starts with a W.
Wiley?
No, I can't remember the Frisco school with the W. Wakeland. Wakeland's got a real good fine arts program. Okay, so those areas are really well impacted by the school district and the school zone that they're in. Little Elm has an unfortunate reputation for their school. And I don't really know why. I can't reference why. I don't know if it's based on athletics. I don't know if it's based on academic rating. But you'll see that there's like 423 kind of splits Frisco and Little Elm, right? They're not exactly, but it's kind of in that neighborhood. Everything that's to the left of 423 is in the 400,000 or 500,000. Everything that's to the right is in the 600,000 to 800,000. And it's the only difference is the school district. That's the only difference. Lake Dallas ISD. That's the school district that I live in. It's real expensive. It's a real expensive school district, Lake Dallas ISD. People will kill, maim, and murder to not be in that school district and to be in Denton instead. It's wild.
Yeah.
And people are like, why? Like, well, I think that one's based on the football team's record. But and so that's why I say it's such a nuanced question. What's a good school district? Like, I don't know what you're looking for. I don't know. I don't know what that means.
And if it's that one where you have to fight, good with a bow staff.
It was Garland.
Garland. Plano, Plano's got East and West Plano are pretty good schools, and Central Plano is probably not as good as the East and the West. Yeah. And so, you get a school district like Richardson, where you got Lake Highlands is well thought of for all the people that live down there.
Yeah, Berkner's got a good band. Plano,
Pierce. And so anyway, there's lots of different, but school districts do drive the value of the neighborhood. And like Thomas said, it's hard to say what's good and what's not good. It's kind of a scale of relativism. And certain people, so like good to one is not necessarily good to another. So good to us is small school, lots of attention. We're actually moving out of the city. We're moving from a 6A school to a 3A school.
That student to teacher ratio.
Yeah, and that student to teacher ratio. And so we wanted a smaller school, but with a smaller school is less opportunity. So there's not the medical coding class, and there's not this specialty class. And
Can't play lacrosse.
Yeah, we're willing to give up some of the fringe elements for a better core experience. And some people that script is flipped. So like you said, it's very nuanced.
It's also the biggest indicator of what your property taxes are going to be.
Sure.
Your school district is your biggest liability. It's your biggest line item on your property taxes.
Absolutely.
Wonder how much that Flying Scott Highland Park marching playing the bagpipe band.
Yeah. Being a Highlander is expensive.
Well, it's ironic because like Dallas ISD that nobody wants to be a part of is way more expensive than Denton ISD. And Frisco ISD is less expensive than Denton.
HOAs.
Yeah.
Homeowners associations. Mm-hmm. Probably your perception of a homeowners association probably has a lot to do with your personality.
Yeah.
Would you say that's accurate? So
does that mean
people that want to be left alone,
or a Karen? The Karens out there?
Yeah, there are a gaggle of Karen HOAs, and I got to tell you, got to be in a very particular tax bracket if you're in a gaggle of Karen HOA. But here's how I've always approached HOAs. One is they're in a spectrum. There are some HOAs that are like, hey, you got to mow your lawn sometimes. And there are some HOAs that are like, hey, you painted your door blue and now it's faded a little bit, and we're going to fine you $1,600 a day until you paint the door again. By the way, you got to pick from these selected swatches, right? Like there's different types of HOAs, and so a lot of times, I started my real estate career in the city of Denton, and I would have first-time home buyers. They would come to me and they'd be like, hey, we don't want to be in an HOA, and I would go, okay. And I would take them to this neighborhood in Denton called Bent Creek Estates. And Bent Creek Estates, actually about 7-8 years ago, was hit by a tornado. Really cleaned the place up. But Bent Creek Estates, this is a neighborhood where you've got like pontoon boats in the yard, like the Cadillac on cinder blocks out front, the tall grass, the like janky fences. I mean, it's not a cosmetically beautiful.
Beware of dog signs.
Yeah, all of those chickens, the whole 9 yards. And I'll take people to those neighborhoods, and they'll be like, "This is not what we're looking for. And I go, okay, let me take you to one other neighborhood.
Well, this is HOA free. You got to tell them.
This is an HOA free, right?
You said, show me all
this is
the
what you
HOA
said.
free houses, and here we are.
I'll take them a couple miles down the road to another neighborhood called Wheeler Ridge. Same caliber of houses, very similar price point, but they've got one of those HOAs that's like, hey, you got to mow your lawn and you can't put a pontoon boat on the yard. And they're like, oh yeah, this is it. I'm like, okay, this is like a $100 a year HOA. Okay. And I think you're going to be okay here. I think it's going to be fine. Okay. Like they got a pool, right? Okay. So there's different incentives. And so, I've had the gambit of people who will, shout at me, I want an HOA. I've never had anybody say I really desperately want an HOA. I don't think anybody's ever said that to me. But if it were me, I probably would not shy away from it. We should investigate, right?
We were wanting to buy a house, and we knew that we'd want to put a shed back there for me to work in and have a studio. And so we said no HOAs. There are HOAs that'll let you build in your backyard.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And, there are some HOAs that are, like I remember the most expensive house I ever listed was in a neighborhood called Vaquero in Westlake. This is where the Jonas Brothers grew up. This is where all the celebrities, all the athletes live. There is a lot of neighborhoods are gated. This one is guarded. There's a difference. This one has a gate with a person with a gun standing in front of it. And you have to have your credentials to get in. That's a very specific type of HOA. It costs thousands of dollars a month. So what I just tell people is that, there's different options. Now, we've talked a lot about older homes. Most older homes are not going to have an HOA. They're not going to have one. But what you'll find is that the type of people that are gravitated towards those old houses are not the type of people that are going to park a pontoon boat on the front yard. So a lot of times it's yet another due diligence thing. That's not something that you can really have an inspector check out. It's something that you have to go and look at. Like, what does the neighborhood look like? We just find that in older I don't know that I could point to specifically what it is, but we just find that in older neighborhoods it just tends not to be a problem.
Yeah, so in Plano, we have the property standards folks riding around, so we don't have an HOA, but you can't park a trailer on grass.
Code enforcement.
Yeah, there's plenty of code enforcement property standards, so that's a question to ask. And so I guess if I'm to sum up what we are saying about HOAs is not all HOAs are created equal.
Yeah, I wouldn't write them off.
Some provide value.
Yeah.
Some provide no value, and some provide too much value that they're oppressive and restrictive. And so
it's a headache.
It depends. So the pro or con or up or down vote on a HOA would be it depends.
Right.
And the right HOA can really be a positive contribution, and the wrong HOA can really be trouble.
Yeah, the first neighborhood up here that I ever lived in, they disbanded the HOA. There was the company that originally set it up. They were like, hey, we're thinking about selling the rights to running the HOA to this other smaller company, and this other smaller company took over. Everyone got pissed off, and the homeowners, I don't even know how they do it, but the homeowners all banded together and ousted it. And so what's funny is that they only ousted it for phase 1. So if you move into that neighborhood, phase 1 does not have an HOA, but phases 2, 3, 4, and 5 do.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Texas is a weird state for real estate, man.
Moving on to, so you've done your due diligence, you've looked at the house, you've inspected the house, you've checked out the school district, you've figured out what things are easy to change and hard to change.
Yep.
We've determined whether we want a HOA or not HOA. So let's talk about tips and tricks on actually buying the house and landing the deal. Do you go in, just, some thoughts? Do you go in at asking price and try and beat the house down, make it look bad on paper? To talk through some strategies on here that people can enlist to help them make a better deal.
Yeah, so that's the fun part.
Well, I say make a better deal. Also get the house, win the house, right?
Yeah.
So you got a lot of competitive stuff going on. Talk about some strategies on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the best thing to do is, real estate doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? And so if you're looking to buy this house versus buying this house, it's going to be a radically different experience. And so the first thing I always have my clients look into is let's look at so Our approach on a house that's been on the market for 3 days is going to be radically different than our approach for a house that's been on the market for 99 days. Okay. Our approach for a neighborhood that has an average duration on market of 90 days is going to be really, really different from an average duration on market of 10 days, right? And so I'm always giving people strategies, and obviously we're also going to run comps and let them know what we actually think the property is valued at versus where it's listed. So my favorite tip is you should have a real estate professional who does this, not an order taker. We have a lot of order takers in our industry. I'm not trying to talk bad about anybody, or maybe I am. Maybe this is the platform to talk bad about everyone. But you have a lot of order takers out there. They'll say, well, what do you want to do on this house? And the buyer, who has bought exactly 100% of nothing, is like, oh, well, I think we want to offer $50,000 less and ask them to replace all the doorknobs. And the real estate agent's like, all right, here we go. And they'll go and do that. It's like, what are you doing? This is the best. This is the part. This is where you get to be a professional. And so I'm always trying to get my client the absolute best deal. But ultimately, I always say I write offers not to be negotiated, but to be signed. So there's a strategy that's really well known in sales, which is like, you come in low first, and then let them try to meet you in the middle, and you're playing this game, and it's like all you're doing is you're wearing down the other party. And the problem with this is you're not even in contract yet, and this is the first part of like 12 different negotiation points. You haven't gone through, you haven't done your due diligence, you don't know anything about the property. We haven't had an appraisal yet. We don't know if the roof is insurable. Like you probably shouldn't try to get all your eggs in the basket in one go. So I'm always trying to put together a fair offer that's fair for both parties. It's a win-win for everybody. Let's get into contract. Let's do our due diligence. We'll negotiate again, and we almost always do. And during that due diligence negotiation, it is extraordinarily rare that I will recommend that a buyer ask a seller to repair something. I think people think of it as the repair period. They're like, okay, well, I want the seller to repair that. I was like, I bet you don't. I bet you don't want the seller to repair that. Because, if you're selling a property, you don't own this, you're not going to own it anymore. Are you going to get like the most, like we talked about Milestone and all these big companies, you're going to get them to do it. You're going to get your neighbor Bob to do it, who like has touched wires before. He's like, no, I think I could do it. Like, who are you going to have do it? You're probably going to have Bob do it because you don't really care about the result. And so 99% of the time we're getting credits for those things. So there's just a couple of things that I recommend. I think that if I were to have just an overarching point over like a great strategy for, what should you do? You should hire an actual professional. Don't do it yourself. I'm a DIYer. I love DIYing. I've done tile, I've done countertops. I've painted. It's fun. The one area where I wouldn't DIY is on like the biggest asset that you're going to purchase in your life at any given time. So I'd hire a professional. That's what I'd do.
I have a strategy on houses I've bought over the years, and I like the strategy of coming in at asking price and make a asking price offer, realizing that when you have the house inspected, your inspector is going to beat up on the house on paper. And I like to come back with my concessions and ask for, and I feel like that's my money off down the road. And it's been that way because I feel uncomfortable asking for a deal unless I can prove to them that their price is not right. And so anytime I've ever bought a house, I've looked at exactly what you said, looked at comps, and what I felt like my mission was to either pay the price they were asking or explain to them mathematically or factually why that price was not right, why they were asking the wrong price for that house. So if I was able to go in and figure out this house is this, all things are equal and your house is too high, I felt like I could comfortably ask for a concession on that price. But otherwise, I just wrote an asking price offer, and then during the option period, we would just beat up on the house, make the house look bad on paper, and get our concessions that way.
Yeah, I always explain to my sellers, and I assume that there's similar conversations that other agents are having with their sellers, which is that the market speaks to us. Market speaks to us, right? And so the number I always give is 10 days. I'm like, look, if we put your house on the market, okay, 8 showings equals an offer, okay, generally. So if we put your house on the market for 10 days, that's 2 showing weekends, right? We put it on Thursday or Friday of one week. We go through a weekend, and then another weekend happens. That's about 10 days. If we go through 10 days and we don't have 8 showings, we have a colossal, epic marketing problem. It's probably the price. Market speaks to us. If we put your house on the market for 10 days, we get 8 showings or more, and we don't have any offers, that's an indication of a condition issue, meaning we're getting people to the door and they're showing up and going, oh, that's not what we thought it was going to look like. It's not what we thought it was going to smell like, etc. Right? And I always prepare my sellers to expect to have to reduce the price or to accept a lower price if we're on the market for more than 10 days. I tell them that. I was like, it's going to start adjusting down. I would say once we're in that 30-day area, you should expect a 1 to 2% reduction. And then once we're in that like 30 to 60 to 90 day, like you should expect like a 3 to 5% reduction. And I'm always encouraging them to like, you should be aggressive and you don't want to chase the market down, right? So I try to have those conversations. And so when I'm representing a buyer, what I'm trying to tell them is I was like, look, the seller knows that they're going to have to negotiate here. So, it's a case-by-case basis on where we go at it. If I think that their price is somewhat reasonable, we'll go in at asking. If I think their price is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, plastic banana, good time, rock and roll, stupid, I'm really happy to write an offer that reflects what I think about it. So, and we tend to get them accepted. And I would say we're in the 90th percentile on getting those taken. So, and then I wouldn't say that I'm going to try to make them look bad on paper, but I'm going to give them the paper that exposes what's really wrong with the house. I never send the full inspection report to the seller because you're forcing them into a situation where they're going to have to disclose all of that, assuming this contract doesn't work out. So I send the applicable pages. But yeah, we're usually able to negotiate real well using that strategy. So yeah, it works.
You told me about a trick a long time ago. I don't know if this is still true, but when you put a price out there that there are certain brackets where people are searching, and maybe it's 150 to 300 and then 300 to 450, that 300 number that you can get found in both of those, the upper and the lower. Is that still?
Yeah. It's a seller strategy. And what I always explain to people is that, 96% of people are starting their real estate search online. If you go to any of these real estate websites, go to your favorite one, go to Zillow, go to the Evil Z, and look, and you'll notice that all of that, whenever you click on buy a home, you don't type in the prices that you're interested in. It brings a drop-down menu. And that drop-down menu is broken up into brackets originally at 100,000. It's 100,000 to 200,000, 200,000 to 300,000, 300,000 to 400,000, et cetera. And I'm like, okay. So the problem is they're clicking on this price. So let's just say that they click on $300,000 to $500,000. Perfect. And you've got a beautiful, great home. Let's say it's in the Colony. It's one of those ranch-style houses. It's like 1,800 square feet. And you've got it priced at $299,000. That house is perfect for that buyer. Will they ever see it?
No.
You missed them by $1,000. $1,000, I'm sure you would have been happy to have, because you were trying to do I call it Bob Barker pricing. Remember, the Price is Right. Like all the prices are on that. It's like it's $199, right? Spay your neighbors. So that's the strategy. And I'm just like, okay, that was a really cool strategy when we were selling stuff out of the Sears Roebuck catalog. In 2024, where we're starting our real estate search online, you are botching your exposure by trying to be, we've got the 9s. You've got some people that think 8s or 7s are lucky. They're like, we're going to price it at $377, $888. I was like, you're an idiot. It's just idiotic. We price houses where digitally they're going to be seen by the most people. And so, yes, that's still a strategy that I employ today. I've been called an idiot for using that strategy, but I can demonstrate that there is a higher list to sales price ratio by listing on those numbers versus listing on the 9s. I can prove it. So,
pretty cool.
Well, I don't know if y'all found that interesting, topics of the real estate today, but I find it tremendously interesting and helpful, and we can't thank Thomas enough for his information.
Yes.
Appreciate that. Thanks for stopping by. But before, there's our crowd of canned laughter and applause there in the background.
In the balcony. Yeah.
He's showing off all his stuff on his board now. All right, so lightning round. Thomas, before you get out of here, favorite Cusack, John or Joan?
I think I'm partial to Joan.
Joan, it is.
Yeah.
Most embarrassing moment of your life?
One time I had a solo. I was a trumpet player in high school. I had a solo, and I was really excited about my solo, but I was also really nervous. And the part right before my solo, I had a mute in my trumpet. You know what a mute is? It makes it sound a lot different. I forgot to take that out in my nervousness. And so right when my solo was supposed to start, I realized that the mute was in my horn. And so I went to take it out, and I dropped it on the floor. And so instead of, if you go back and watch the recording, instead of a solo, a beautiful,
You fumbling act.
you just hear metal hitting hardwood. So it was.
Okay, that's not horrible. Though.
No one
It
ever
sounds
talked to me about
You had
it.
a pretty good. Oh, no one ever mentioned it.
No,
Okay.
it was one of those things like we're just not going to talk
say
about it.
anything to him.
Yeah.
All right, corner flour tortilla.
Flour.
Funniest person you know.
Rhett Hulcy.
Handshake or fist bump.
Handshake.
Who is your favorite bear?
Yogi.
Favorite berry.
Raz.
Pen or pencil.
Pen.
First car.
2002 Chevy Avalanche.
How long did you believe in Santa? Be honest.
Until I was 9.
Do you work out?
Be honest.
Yes.
Favorite movie.
This one is favorite movie as a realtor.
The Big Short.
Well, no, this is as
Oh, you
we're-
have 4 to pick from.
Yeah,
Oh.
we give you the 4.
Of these 4, which like you best? Cider House Rules, Roadhouse, Little House on the Prairie, Big Mama's House.
See, they all have house in there.
I see that.
What was the second one?
Roadhouse.
Yeah. The new one or the old one?
Going Roadhouse.
Okay.
Handshake or fist bump?
Handshake.
Do you follow all the COVID rules back in the day?
Never did.
Me either.
Yeah.
Hunter, fisher, or gatherer? How do you classify yourself?
I like to gather. Like a hoarder would.
And last but not least, favorite restaurant in the DF Dub?
Oh.
This isn't exactly lightning, is it? Hey, I like Marty B's.
Brilliant!
All right.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Outstanding. Thomas, thank you so much for stopping by the Brick Wall Round Table.
Oh, and we got a little something for you. This
Yeah.
is a little test.
Okay, Barnum and Bailey graham crackers.
Okay.
Can you name 2 of the 5 animals in here?
Elephant.
It's 3.
Jackpot. Oh, 3.
You have to
Sorry.
name 3 of them.
Elephant. Yes. Check mark.
Barnum and Bailey. So an elephant would have been in the circus. What other animals? Zebra?
We're asking you.
Zebra. Nice. Zebra is
Zebra?
on there.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, 2 for 2.
Son of a mother. Is there, okay, monkey.
I'm going to give it to you because it is a gorilla in here. So
I was in band.
A little high. Mathlete, not an athlete.
sorry for that. Well, thanks for joining us. Hope you stop back by for the next episode of Pros Podcast, where we discuss all things home repair, home purchase, and how we got there, steps A to Z. Bye-bye.